Hello everyone and welcome on International Women's Day to this webinar, this IMRF webinar, at which we're going to launch our report into the recently completed survey on the representation of women in maritime search and rescue. I'll go on to explain how the agenda for the webinar and introduce our speakers very shortly. But for the moment, I'd just like to introduce the system to those of you who haven't used it before. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see that there is a chat box. That chat box is for you to use when you introduce yourself, to make any comments, or to raise any questions with the panel or for the speakers as we go through the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and a recording of the webinar, which will include any presentations, will be posted on the IMRF website within the next day or two. So if you want to share it with anybody else or watch bits of it again or look at some of the presentations, then it will be there on the website for you to access and download. The chat box, the information, the comments that are put in the chat box are also recorded, and a record of that chat box exchange will also be placed on the IMRF website afterwards. So if there's anything that you want to say or any questions that we don't get to today, they will be recorded there and we will be following them up afterwards if we run out of time today. So I'd just like to say a few words about the webinar agenda for today. So in a moment, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to the IMRF's Women in SAR project. And then I'm delighted that we've got Ricky Lint with us, the General Secretary of the Norwegian Sea Rescue Society, who's going to talk about why this is such an important initiative. Then Dave Jardine-Smith, who has done all the analysis of the survey responses, which was quite an arduous task, because as he'll tell you, there were well over 1,000 individual responses. Dave will give us an overview of the report and some of the recommendations and conclusions that come out of it. Then we're very pleased to have Commander of Maritime Dr. Susanna Razali Chan, who is the Chief Assistant Director of the SAR Division at the Malaysian Maritime Authority, who was with us also, for those of you who were at the World Maritime Rescue Congress in Vancouver a couple of years ago. Susanna was there, and she's going to talk about some of her experiences and what happens, or the situation as she has experienced it in her own organisation. And then we've got Michael Vlasto, former IMRF chair, who many of you will know, who's going to talk about why it's important that change starts at the top, and also to give a personal perspective on the importance of addressing gender balance challenges. After that, we will have a panel session where we'll have be an opportunity for you to put your questions through the chat box. We'll be collating those as we go through the webinar, and hopefully we will ask our panel members if they can give us their views and answer some of the questions if you've got any on the presentations or any general comments or points that you would like to make. And then at the very end, we'll just look at next steps for the project. So without any further ado, I will carry on. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Teresa Crossley. I'm the CEO of the International Maritime Rescue Federation. Today, International Women's Day, the theme for the 2021 International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge, which I think is a very pertinent mantra for this project, because part of what we have done today is about with the project, with the thing, is about challenging some of the stereotypes, some of the misconceptions about what women in particular can bring to search and rescue operations in all its aspects, not just on the front line, but behind the scenes as well. So the aims and origins of this project were very much about improving the representation of women in the maritime sector as a whole, particularly in maritime SAR sector, and to provide support for and to raise the profile of the women who were already in the maritime SAR sector. Now, we started this project off, we launched it way back in Vancouver at the World Maritime Rescue Congress, and I'm very pleased that at that point we were able to have Ricky Lint, who's with us today, was there to help us launch the project. We had a networking lunch at the Congress, which was one of the best attended side events that were held during those 3 or 4 days that we were in Vancouver. And Ricky, and with the support of Ricky and the Norwegian Sea Rescue Society, we were able to start the process of setting up a Women in SAR network and trying to build towards where we're, the project that we've got today. Moving on from there, we're also very grateful to Trinity House, which is a maritime, very large and generous maritime charity in the UK, who have provided some more funding, which allowed us to run the survey and some of the events that we're planning to go forward and to actually get the report written. So we're grateful to all those people who have supported this project so far. We're going to move on now, because really what you're quite keen to hear from are the speakers. And so I'd like to introduce Ricky Lint, who, as I've said, is the General Secretary of the Norwegian Sea Rescue Society, and who has been a big supporter of this initiative right from the start. So Ricky, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. Is there a problem?
No.
I'm giving this feedback on my, no, it's fixed. Thank you. So it's a great day. So first of all, congratulations to all of you women out there. This is the 8th of March, the Women's Day. And my mother started going in the streets, shouting out her voice. Today, we're sitting here on the internet, we're in a webinar, but it's still important that we focus on this issue. It's still important that we celebrate the Women's Day. My daughter asked me, she's 13, the youngest daughter, what day is it? Why? Why would you celebrate Women's Day? She didn't understand, and I think, thank God, good. Maybe we changed something. Maybe there's actually been a movement from during these 50 years, and of course it has. But I told my daughter what I was going to do today, and I think she was a little bit proud of that and understood that there's still areas that we need to focus on. And why it matters, yes. 3 reasons. Research shown us that company organization focused on diversity, deliver diversity, they improve their results financially and in other areas. So being an organization with diversity gives you better results. Secondly, it gives you better people, because when you take all the people into your recruitment base, not only 50% of them, it actually gives you the opportunity to pick better people. So that's number 2. Number 3, focusing on gender equality, diversity gives you a better reputation. And we know more than ever that a good reputation is important for funding, for donations. So this is the 3 reasons I will give you. Better financial results, better people, better reputation. And in the end, you will also, through this work, create a culture who will feels good for everyone, and being able to not coming into a new Me Too period, because we know that organizations and companies who's been through this very serious Me Too movement, who was actually a fantastic thing for women around the world, but it hasn't been good for financial reputation or anything. So This is also investing in a good culture. And what we did in RS is that I decided to take a holistic approach. We needed to do something on many levels. And I was a little bit shocked when I came into the maritime industry and SAR. I've been in the government, and then before that I was in the ship owner organization. But I was a little bit shocked when I understood that this was really, really a men's club. I mean, in 2015, I was the first woman elected in the board of directors in IMRF. And that was in 2015. So we are a very conservative branch, and there's a lot of bias out there, thinking that you need to be strong, you need to be fit. This is not, especially when it comes to the operations, this is not for women. And there is also this historical thing that seafarers traditionally is men. So my impression was that there's something we need to do. I was a little bit shocked, but then I told my board we're going to change this. We need to try. And I'm proud of what we've done, but we still have work to do. But you need to have a holistic approach, and you need to start at the top. You need to have a look at the board. That's where everything starts. So we, from having only 2 women on board, we now have statutes that says that we must have 40% of each gender in our board. And here in the picture you can see the new board. I'm very proud of it. It's now 30% women, and it's younger people, and there is competence from sectors that we haven't had represented before. And so it's diversity in a big picture, and it drives the organization in a new way. And then you have the management team, my team. I choose a picture of Julia Berge. She's a new director of digitized and innovation. She started 1st of January 2021, and 1st of March she left because she had a baby, so she became a mom, and now is in permanent leave. But that was not an issue for me. That she was pregnant, and she was going to be away for months, just a few weeks after she came to us. And that is also the bias again, and the mindset. No one would ever ask a man, are you going to have a baby? But we often ask women, and we can see it also when they are pregnant, of course. But so take a look into your own bias on all the different levels of the organization. And we also discuss this very often in my management team. Where are we? Are we satisfied? What's happening? And it's very often about the small things. And that's what I like about this webinar, and that IMRF is putting this on the agenda, so we can have best practice and learn from each other. Because what we learned when we started to look into why are we struggling when it comes to the operations and the people out in the boats, what is it's so difficult to recruit women in SAR. And one thing that we saw, that all the pictures we were sending out in presentation, in social media, to donators, to politicians, even when we were trying to recruit people, there were pictures of men. So just a simple thing to reorganize all the campaign material was giving us new focus, and also building a focus on and picture internal, that we stopped seeing a SAR operation woman or as a man thing, but we started to see it also as a natural woman thing, just by giving these pictures to everyone. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we made a special recruitment campaign were going to reach out to women, and in this campaign we used women themselves. And in the picture on the right here, you can see Hanne. Hanne is volunteer in Horten, and she started 4 years ago, and she's now a master. And when Hanne started, she also reached out to friends, to others, and now Hanne is one of our leading role models. And we use her in the campaigns. And when she talks to other women and tell how she feels that she's treated equally, she's a part of a team, and she's going into all the situations that also the men are going into, that there's no, she's treated equally. And that I'm very proud. I have a note from her here, and she said the whole group meets common challenge together in respect of gender. I never feel in the crew that I as a woman are treated less professional than the others. And I think that I'm very glad to hear that, and that shows that it's possible. It's possible to build a new mindset, get rid of our own bias, reach out to women, and we see now in some of our groups we have 30% women. There is still, especially when it comes to the paid seafarers, and some of our groups in northern Norway, when the population is less, it's still a challenge. And I'm not satisfied at all, absolutely not. And also as a management team in the land organization, we still have a work to do. But I'm looking forward to participate to this webinar, and to all of you out there, and especially to those of you who are the first in your team, the first in your crew. What you're doing matters. What you do, you're breaking the glass seal, you're making sure that it's possible to get through. And what is also important, that those of us who's coming through the glass heel into management boards, other groups, make sure that we reach out and take other women in. That's also our responsibility, to make sure that it comes more together with us. So that is also something I always do. I always support women. I always see around me in situations how I can support other women and women. So I will continue to work hard, and hopefully in a few years my figures for RS can be even better. That's our goal. And today at 12 o'clock we will have a meeting with all the people paid and volunteers in RS, and the director of the operation, who is a man. I challenge him to address to the organization on Women's Day how we work, and he was glad to do, and I'm looking forward to listen to him. And that is also a picture of that we created this as a common goal for the board and for the management team. We want to change the culture We want to be an organization who is recognized as diverse, a place where women and men are treated equally. So we're on our way. IMRF is on the way, and with Teresa on the board, with the chief as a chief captain, I'm sure it will push us even further. So looking forward to join the rest of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ricky, for that very interesting and inspirational your opening remarks there, and particularly for reminding us about the importance, first of all, of starting at the top and having role models, but also about the small things that can lead to much bigger changes. And I think that actually leads us on now very nicely, in fact, to let me introduce Dave Jardine Smith, who many of you will know has worked with IMRF for a long time and is enjoying a quiet retirement until he was asked to take on the important job of analysing and sifting through the thousand or so replies that we got to the survey. So, Dave, I think some of the things that Ricky has mentioned there will come up in some of the things that you've got to say. So thank you very much. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Teresa. And hello, everybody. My congratulations too to half the world. As Ricky said, I think it would be nice if we didn't have to have an International Women's Day. We're getting there. We're not there yet. So the survey, and particularly the report into the survey. The survey ran, as you see, from October last year and through until January this year. Its aims was specifically to find a picture of the current situation internationally, globally, and to provide information and data that the IMRF can use to underpin and benchmark its ongoing work on this very important initiative. It was an excellently run and very good results, I should say, from the survey. As you see here, there are over 1,600 responses in all from a total of 48 countries. There's a slight word of caution, a small caveat, in that a very large proportion of those responses came from Northern Europe and from North America. So we need to be a little bit cautious when we come to extrapolate these results to the rest of the world. Nevertheless, some very, very important points were made, and I think some extremely useful data to underpin the ongoing initiative. Of those responses, well over 1,600 individual responses from people around the world, 18 from representative IMRF member organisations, and perhaps the most important figures down the bottom there, 721 women responded to this survey and 911 men. It's important to note at this point that every indication is that is not the way the search and rescue world divides, not in that sort of proportion. It was great to hear, though, from so many women about their very varying experiences. And I think I should say at this point, as an old SAR guy, I have learnt a huge amount from listening to these 721 women as I gone through their responses to the survey. A rather confusing slide, perhaps, but this gives you an indication of the current situation, a snapshot, if you will. The left-hand column gives the total numbers of staff in 8 representative IMRF search and rescue organisations. In most cases, that's their entire list of employees, both paid and voluntary. The bottom one only submitted data for those directly involved in search and rescue, so crew members and so on. The second column shows the number of women involved overall. So to take the top example, 15% of those 9,400 people are women. The third column shows how many women are in paid employment roles, typically in administration, not solely, but often in administration. And the last column shows the number of volunteers. And again, typically that is in search and rescue response units. As you see, quite a mixed picture. At only one point in the entire table here are there more women than men employed, those in paid employment, in the fifth organisation down. And in many cases, the representation of women is clearly less than we would expect or hope it would be, as again Ricky pointed out. There were a total of 24 questions were asked in the survey, quite complex questions. This is just a summary, trying to understand why women joined in the first place, what challenges and concerns they have, what they found positive about their experience, and what their personal aims are, whether they themselves or had experienced discrimination or whether they had witnessed it in their working environment, and whether those problems have been resolved. What advice would they give? And I will say here, in case I mentioned it later, out of all the women who answered that question, not a single one would advise against becoming involved in search and rescue. The point was well made many times that it is not for everybody, male or female, but nobody said, not one person out of the hundreds who replied, said, don't get involved in SAR. They said, do, but there are a few problems. We also asked questions about recruitment and retention, particularly policies in place to aid or support the recruitment and retention in their roles of women. And we sought to highlight, or to find out rather, what barriers there may be in women's way and what sort of encouragement is needed, again, as Ricky was discussing, to enable more women to become involved in what we do. I haven't time, of course, to go through the entire report. So what I'll do now is switch straight to the conclusions from the report to give you an idea of the sort of things that came out of it. The general conclusions, first of all, it was a very good response. As I said earlier, we need to be a little bit cautious about generalizations because so many of the responses came from only a couple of places in the world, or Northern Europe, North America. It's important to say, and I suppose it's obvious really, that women's aims and experience are pretty much the same as men's when it comes to wanting to become involved in search and rescue. All the usual reasons that you would expect. Gender discrimination, though, was a significant challenge for a significant minority of the women responding. To put that in figures, it's about 1 in 9. 1 in 9 women said that that was a significant challenge. It may have been a challenge for others, but not so significant. And we do need to bear in mind, of course, that the survey was specifically asking about women's experience, so it is something that was focused on. Nevertheless, we still have a problem. On the positive side, we must say that a lot of women and men, but a lot of women said that they did not experience discrimination. There was not a problem. It is not a universal problem, but it is still there and still needs to be addressed. Most women made the point, some very strongly, that most male colleagues are supportive and that things are improving generally, as they are in society as a whole. I hope we can agree. Just to give you a quote from one of the female respondents, she said, 98% of the guys are respectful and helpful. There's still that 2%, she said. And it's that 2% who are not supportive and are not helpful and can discriminate. They can ruin somebody's experience. They are a serious problem. Those attitudes do need to be addressed. The survey did not ask at any point about affirmative action and whether people supported it or not. But a lot of people, both male and female, said that they did not support it. In other words, didn't support quotas for women becoming involved. And the quote at the bottom there, a very important one, made in various ways by lots of respondents. We don't need men or women, we need crew. It doesn't matter, or it should not matter. It should not matter whether somebody is male or female, as long as they can take part. Turning to the barriers then, We do have this historical predominance of men in many search and rescue teams, probably in most. There are lots of examples in the survey responses of both conscious and unconscious discrimination. People who, quite frankly, men who, quite frankly, behave badly. A small minority, but nevertheless a problem. But also a lot of people who do not realise that they're discriminating when they are doing it. A simple example, quite often cited by the women responding, was that of, "Can I help you lift that piece of equipment? Is it too heavy for you?" They probably wouldn't ask the same question of a male colleague. There are lots of examples of indirect discrimination, particularly in terms of equipment, sometimes vital safety equipment, which is supplied only in male sizes, it seems. A dry suit that doesn't fit is not a safe piece of equipment. In terms of facilities, that's changing facilities, toilets, showers, sanitary arrangements, not being provided or insufficient provision. Also in terms of language, a lot of maritime language is gendered, it's male. We talk about seamanship, for example. But if that language is used in training manuals or advertisements or any use of language, can we make sure it isn't gendered? That would help. And there are lots of examples in the responses of underuse of women's capabilities. There's an assumption sometimes was reported that a woman can't do something or that a man will do it better without any sort of basis for that assumption. Importantly, again, a lot of women said that they, in order to be treated as equals, they felt they had to outperform men. That clearly is something that is experienced by women, but not by men. Men don't feel they have to outperform a female colleague in search and rescue, but women do, or many of them do. There is this problem, again, Ricky alluded to it, that women just don't know that SAR can be for them. And that impression can be reinforced by poorly thought through advertising, for example. And there are, and this is not a wholly female problem, but it was often cited by women responding to the survey, concerns about family life, and particularly in terms of childcare, and particularly, again, in terms of teams of volunteers, particularly on call-out. Getting childcare at almost no notice is, of course, difficult. What improvements can we make then to move quite swiftly through this? The facilities I've mentioned, the equipment, equitable working conditions, these should be obvious, but there's clearly still quite a long way to go. Role models, very important. Mentoring. It was surprising to me that there aren't more mentoring processes in place where somebody looks after a new entry, a new recruit, and particularly a woman looking after a new female colleague, and somebody to go to would seem to be fairly simple to arrange, and clearly it's very useful. Buddying was also mentioned. A woman joining a rescue boat crew may find she's the only one there. That's going to be an extra challenge for her just before she starts. So having 2 or 3 women on the crew, buddying up, helping each other, somebody to talk to. Equality of opportunity, flexibility of work patterns, clearly important for both recruitment and retention. These were mentioned many times. And it's also the question of all potential recruits should feel that they will receive all the training they need. This seems to be a particular concern for women, going by the survey responses. Again, a quote for you. One lady responding said, "Women believe that they should have more experience before they apply. Men apply anyway." It's important to ensure that training is given as necessary, obviously, but it's also important to reassure everybody they will get that training to enable them to join and to stay. Inclusivity, Ricky mentioned this, it is important. If you're putting an advert up for new crew, make sure there are women on it. If you're sending 2 or 3 speakers to the local school to tell them what your organisation does, Have a woman as part of the team. Get them young, catch them very young. The recruitment should either focus on women, and as I said earlier, there's not universal support for that, or at least emphasize equality. We need to give attention to diversity and equality education for all staff, and I mean all staff, everyone from the most senior down to the most junior in the organization. A lot of good work can be undone by one bad apple in the barrel, as they say. So it is for managers at all levels to address these issues: discriminatory language, bad behavior, bad attitudes, and to set clear expectations for what correct behavior means. Another quote, things are getting better, as people said. Change is slower, said this woman. Change is slower than it would be if there were more support. This is something that needs to be addressed directly and actively, not just in word only. So to conclude, again, a final quote: what we need to do is to adapt a world of men, designed by men, for men. To me, I think the key word there is adapt. It is traditionally, or it has been, a world of men, designed by men, for men. It needs to be adapted. It seems from the results that in many cases it is adapting, or it has adapted well. So it's not a whole revolution that's required. It is adapting the existing situation to make sure that it is a genuinely inclusive sector to move into. Thank you. I'll be happy to deal with any questions if I can when we come to the panel debate later.
Thank you very much, Dave, for outlining what you'd collated from, what you gathered from the many responses that were received to the survey. And as Dave says, although the preponderance of responses were from Northern Europe and North America, that doesn't mean that some of those questions aren't still relevant all over the world and to many organisations. And I think many people watching will perhaps recognise some of the elements, you know, that Dave has mentioned, if you don't recognise all of them. And I think it's quite appropriate that he should finish with a challenge, finish the presentation, his presentation with a challenge, given that the theme of today's International Women's Day is choose to challenge. And one of the people who has chosen to challenge, and very successfully, I might say, is our next speaker, who is Commander Susanna Rosali Chan. And she's going to tell us a bit about her experience and some of the work she's been doing in Malaysia. So, Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Teresa. Hello, everyone. Thanks to the IMRF for inviting me to this special webinar on this special day. So although we are far in distance, and actually it's evening here, 1 hour to sunset, but I believe that we are close enough with each other for me to share on empowering women in maritime search and rescue, a basic mapping of the challenges in Malaysia. So I need to tell everyone here that I've introduced this poster during the World Maritime Rescue Congress in Vancouver back in 2019. And I did some amendment by updating it to the latest information. I'm not sure whether that it's clear enough for you to read everything. So I'm working with the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency, or also known as the Malaysia Coast Guard. So MMEA has just celebrated its 16th birthday last month. Its 16th birthday. So we were established since 2005, and I can say that we are among the youngest Coast Guard agency. And up to now, we are filled up with approximately 4,000 members. And I myself joined the MMEA in 2007, when there was only less than 10 women in MMEA during that time. So you may look on the poster, and I'll just explain on the important part of it. Okay, so in 14 years' time, we managed to have 181 female members, inclusive of officers and ratings. And that is equivalent to a small percentage, just 4.2%, of the total members. Okay. So there were no changes since 2019 as due to the pandemic, and hopefully it will slightly increase this year. And things are getting back to normal. I mean, to the new normal. But what I can say is the government still has their own policy on recruitment in terms of percentage. And for uniform bodies like us, they have certain restrictions on the number of women to be recruited every year. Okay, so from that 181 women we have, they will be attached to various positions in operations, search and rescue, logistics, or management. And from the 181, we have 39% of them are now serving the operation or search and rescue. So how did I get through all this and remain among the expert in maritime search and rescue? So it was a long process. I had to double up my effort by doing extra readings, of course. And what I found was maritime search and rescue is something worth to explore. There's something interesting behind it, and it doesn't wait for a man to plan and execute search and rescue missions, but it could be done by us, women. And it's all about passion and enthusiasm. And if we talk about the challenges, many of them that we had to face even nowadays, such as the policy, the culture itself, where we know that the maritime sector is dominated by men. So I mean, it could be changed by proving that women's capability in the maritime industry is also important. So how is it actually that we channel these women to maritime search and rescue? That 39%. So of course we need to break the tradition, and start by giving them a chance. Give them a suitable rank and power, and look on how they can perform. So in MEMEA, we apply job rotation as well as multi-skilling. But some of them really show their interest and capability in search and rescue. So what we did was by appointing our first female ship commanding officer in Malaysia back in 2018. And to date, we have managed to train and appoint three female officers as commanding officers on board ships. And they act as the on-scene coordinators during maritime SAR missions. And a part of it, the navigation officers are also ladies. What is most interesting to share that we've trained 14 female officers as search and rescue mission coordinators. So if you look at this badge I'm wearing today, so these are the expertise of maritime search and rescue badge in Malaysia. Okay. So part of them, three of them are appointed as the head of operations, search and rescue in 3 states, whereby they also act as the search and rescue coordinators during SAR missions. And these are the advantages of women. Okay, by doing their job from operation center and perform in the administration part of the SAR mission. This is what people don't know. And of course, we need to remember that practice makes perfect. We are not aiming to beat the men, but to complete each other by filling the gaps. Okay, in other words, every man needs a woman when his life is a mess. Because just like the game of chess, the queen protects the king. So just to share with you that I was appointed for search and rescue mission coordinators for many incidents, including complex incidents. And to add on that, recently we have selected 4 candidates for our search and rescue officers to pursue their studies in master's level. And only one of our female officer managed to get a scholarship by the Japanese government. So that is something we are proud about. Okay, and a part of that, we select best ladies for joining training abroad with the Japan Coast Guard, United States, and so on. And I myself has been trained with search and rescue since 2009, together with the other colleagues. And what I found was we women actually could perform in this field. It's not that easy to make decisions, but it is doable. The ladies had been selected as the best participant for almost every search and rescue mission coordinator courses that we've conducted, and it becomes history. And to add on, all of us are aware of women's responsibilities, which are not limited to giving birth, looking after their children, taking care of their school, added with housework, especially during the pandemic. We have to face additional challenges as children are doing homeschooling. We have to play so many roles. So at the same time, you have to work 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 350 days a year. So can you imagine that? So that are the challenges for us. So it is important to give them continuous support and courage. And we can also recognize them, recognize their efforts and contributions towards through awards or any significant recognition. And at the moment, we have numbers of capable female instructors in search and rescue. And I believe we can go further in this field. And they're actually more outstanding. These ladies are actually more outstanding compared to some of the male teammates. And in future, we are looking forward to having our own established maritime search and rescue subject matter expert in Malaysia. So to conclude, engagement of women is crucial in maritime search and rescue, and it's our responsibility, it's the responsibility of all parties to support the way forward. As you can read in my poster, the way forward to increase the involvement of women in maritime search and rescue field. And again, maritime SAR is something worth to explore. Always remember, it is not about gender, but it is about what you can do. Kick the doors open and get ourselves accepted in this field. We have to look outside the traditional boundaries, and that is how it will incorporate more women into the maritime SAR. And last but not least, choose to challenge. Happy International Women's Day. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you. Back to you, Teresa.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you very much for sort of reinforcing some of the challenges and for sort of saying or for reminding everybody that you need to challenge the traditional views, the traditional situations, but also it's important that women are given a chance to show what they can do. And you know, you can't be what you can't see is often what's said. So thank you very much for that fascinating summary. And in fact, that poster is a very good encapsulation of everything that the IMRF Women in SAR initiative is about. And with that, I would just like to hand over now to Michael Vlasto, who was formerly an IMRF chair. He's been a great champion of equality of opportunity for women over his maritime career, and he sort of joined us at the launch of this particular initiative in Vancouver, and I'm delighted that he's come back today to say a few words. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Teresa, and hello to all of you wherever you are around the world. Happy International Women's Day. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the IMRF on commissioning this important report and thank those who've researched it, written it, and contributed to the findings. The response has been excellent, and the valuable data that's been collected underpins the report's recommendations. And when we launched this report at the World Maritime Rescue Congress in Vancouver in 2019, there was considerable enthusiasm at the time, and it's good to see how this has gained momentum over the last 18 months. I've always been an advocate of getting more women involved in maritime SAR, and must admit to the fact that my generation has not always been as progressive in this respect as it might have been. When I joined the RNLI in 1975 from the Merchant Navy, there were fewer than 10 women amongst our 4,500 volunteer lifeboat crew members. As a point of interest, our first female crew member, who joined in 1968, was Elizabeth Hosford, an 18-year-old Norwegian student at Atlantic College in South Wales. So very appropriate that the Norwegian Sea Rescue Society, led by Ricky, who you heard from earlier, enthusiastically sponsored the launch of this project. The better news is that more than 50 years later, there are now over 800 women lifeboat crew members in the RNLI, with many qualified as coxswains and helmswomen. Improving gender balance has always been a high priority for me, but breaking down some of the more traditional thinking, particularly in remote locations and small fishing communities where we operated, proved quite a challenge and really required some innovative thinking. I'll give you an example. Small fishing village somewhere in the UK. The crew were mainly local fishermen, but with the demise of fishing, they all ended up going off to a town about 10 miles away. So, you know, the men, the crewmen, were not able to be around to provide the daytime cover in this particular community. I was under some pressure to close the station because we couldn't provide a crew. And then talking to one or two locals, I suggested amongst some of the wives and partners and women who were working in the village, perhaps they could get trained up and form a crew to cover while the men were away during the day. Well, you can imagine how popular I was making this suggestion, but we persevered, we got a crew trained up, and the rest was history. The station became busier and busier. We ended up with, you know, a mix of crews during the working time and during weekends and in the evenings, and we moved forward. But it was challenging at the time. One of the best things we did in the RNLI was to break the mold by moving into beach lifeguarding in 2000, when a new generation of younger and perhaps physically fitter people without preconceived ideas came into the organization. This accelerated an improvement in gender balance and also led to a better diversity of thinking as the two different cultures came together with a shared learning experience. 20 years on, women now make up 19% of the RNLI's lifeboat crew members and nearly 30% of the beach lifeguards, so steady progress is being made. Tradition is a wonderful thing and an important part of the foundations of many organisations like the RNLI. However, it can also act as a blocker if not managed appropriately. Changing learned behaviour patterns is challenging, but often necessary if organisations are to thrive and develop. It does seem rather illogical to me to reduce the talent pool for prospective lifesavers by 50% due to gender bias. Now, more recently, as chairman of another maritime charity dealing with the welfare of commercial fishermen, I've faced similar issues in getting better representation on the board of trustees. Many countries have overarching charity regulators who provide oversight and guidance with regard to diversity and inclusivity issues. Discriminatory behaviour is not acceptable at any level in an organisation, and good leadership should ensure this. Leaders, by which I mean trustees, directors, senior managers, must champion the changes needed by setting an example themselves, as well as monitoring progress, perhaps through regular surveys, against clearly declared objectives. There is always a need to be careful not to fall into the trap of tokenism. Recruit on the basis of appropriate skill sets and potential, as well as achieving a good balance with clearly stated diversity objectives. I hope the recommendations from this report assist our members and others in the maritime SAR world to reflect on how their organisations are dealing with this important issue and what potential changes would make that even better. Changes such as identifying any shortfalls in PPE, training and terminology, which can then be made good for the future. The IMRF's customers are those in trouble in the world's waters. We say it regularly and need to focus on getting the very best people, regardless of gender, involved in maritime SAR. Women have a massive part to play in achieving our objectives, and the recommendations from this report should be seriously considered and acted upon if we're really to become truly gender blind in the future. A final thought. We don't discriminate against the gender of those who are rescued. So why do we do so for the rescuers? Thank you. And just before Teresa cuts me off, while I have your attention as chairman of the IMRF Awards panel, can I please remind you all that we're looking for submissions for the various awards categories, including the more recently introduced Women in SAR Award for someone, male or female, who has done a lot to advance the cause of equality of opportunity for women in SAR. Details of the award categories, closing dates, and nomination forms are on the IMRF website. The award provides an effective window on the selfless work being carried out by all our maritime SAR organisations around the world. Your support is essential. Thank you. Back to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you also for reminding us that the IMRF awards are there, but it's not the Women in SAR award. None of the awards are exclusively for male or female. We'd like nominations from for all categories from from all genders. Now, the next, we're just going to have, I think we've just got time for a short panel session. So I'd be delighted if the rest of the speakers could join Michael and I, just to think of some of the comments that have been coming in, some of the questions. I know that, Ricky, you have to go soon because you've got another meeting. So maybe I'm going to put the first point to you first, if I may. One of the comments that's been made is that to make a difference, you need to change some policies, you know, and you touched on that in your speech, you know, looking at recruitment policy, for example. But if you don't change policies, won't things just stay the same?
Very good question. I will say no. All the experience we have in Norway, who is a country who's in forefront when it comes to gender equality and gender diversity, history has shown that you need to change and statutes, how many women you should have on boards, on management teams, and etc. And I don't think we would have seen this big change in many areas of Norway if we didn't use that law that we also just a few years ago. We started with the politics, and then it also all the listed companies in the stock, Oslo stock, need to show that they have now 40% of women or both gender on boards, and that's also changed a lot. So good words are nice, and supporting leaders like Michael Vlasto, he was the one who actually pushed me into the board and wanted to change. So you need that also. That's very good, but I think it will go easier and quicker if you use regulations.
Thank you for that. So, Susanna, you spoke in your presentation about some of the things that have been happening in the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency to give women a chance to show their potential. And is that what you think has made a big difference?
Yeah. Okay. To make a difference, we must give them the chance, as I said. As I mentioned before, that if we don't give them the chance, we are not able to dig in what are their expertise, what are the skills they have.
Thank you. Dave, have you, from your, you've ploughed through or read an awful lot, as you said. You said you'd learnt a lot. What would you think was what you've learnt most from the experience of reading all those submissions?
That's a good question. I learnt a great deal. Which was the highest? I don't know. I am, to some extent, and Michael perhaps is the same, we were commented on, our generation of old guys in search and rescue being part of the problem. That obviously is a situation which should resolve itself as we all retire. But the issues remain. If I must pick one of the many, many things that I learned, I think it would be to say that 65% of women responding to the survey said that they had either themselves or had seen other women face barriers in search and rescue, barriers that are based on their gender. Only 53% of men said the same thing. So perhaps we can conclude that it's easier to see a barrier if you're the one who's facing it. Now that is, a clever thing to say, if you like, but it also has resonance for senior management teams. If senior management teams have come up through the process over decades, they tend to be male, they tend to have a certain viewpoint of life, and with the best intentions in the world, they may not be aware of the issues. They won't see the barriers because they themselves haven't faced them. I think it is very important that the words of, well, everyone who responded so kindly to the survey, but particularly those 721 women, are read by the by senior managers, by any manager, by any member of the search and rescue organisation, but particularly senior management teams, to review their processes, their policies, just the attitudes within their organisations, and say, can we do this better to encourage more women to join and then to stay?
Thank you. Michael, is there anything that you'd like to sort of add?
Oh, lots. It's a mindset. It's a mindset to me. I mean, there's best practice, there's peer pressure, there's all sorts of things that are nudging things along in the right direction. It is becoming a very topical issue, and I think, as I mentioned in my words, one has to be careful not just to jump onto this particular train, as it were, because everybody else is talking about it. There's got to be a mindset, and it's got to be something that you really believe is right, and then you can move it forwards. Don't just talk about it, do something.
Okay, that's a very good piece of advice, actually, and I think it chimes with what Ricky said. Unfortunately, Ricky's had to go because she's had another meeting. But Susanna, I wonder, in fact, I'm going to ask each of you in turn. But Susanna, can I start with you? I mean, you're in now a senior position. You're quite experienced. You're very experienced in maritime search and rescue. What would you hope to see 5 years from now? How would you hope the position to have changed in terms of women's participation?
In 5 years' time. So what I wish to see is, of course, more women coming in, and with their mind changed, they have to change their mindset. And I have to say that I have to increase their capacity building by maybe putting a lot of effort on their training, and involve them into international activities. As we know that search and rescue, we learn by sharing. We learn by sharing experience.
That's very, in fact, that's what the IMRF is all about too, which is learning by sharing. I think is a very good thing. Dave, is there anything that you would just like to say? What would you like? How would you like to see the position in 5 years' time? Do you think, from what you've seen? Are you on mute, Dave? Sorry. My
apologies. People have been trying to mute me for years. it is an improving situation. That's the important, one of the important points that came out of the responses. It needs to continue to improve. There's a way to go in many parts of the world. And I would hope in 5 years' time that we'll be able to perhaps, in a sense, redo this process and see those changes have progressed. I refer to the quote I quoted earlier, that change is slower than it would be if there were more support. Well, let's get that support and change quicker.
Thank you. That's quite a thought. Hopefully you'll be still around to do the survey analysis in 5 years' time. Michael, have you got anything? What would you like to say? How would you like to see the situation change in 5 years' time? Not just perhaps in maritime SAR, but in the maritime sector generally.
Well, this is, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I, as a former chairman, but this is, to me, one of the areas, important areas, where the IMRF itself as an organisation, an overarching organisation, can make a difference. Because whilst organisations tend to look often inwardly at themselves and what they're doing, we do see in the IMRF what's happening in all around the world. And one of the clever tricks is to help, through the IMRF, share best practice. You know, sort of a bit of a Robin Hood outfit, whereby you can take best practice from one part of the world and introduce it to another part of the world. And that's what international organizations can do well. So I think the IMRF can keep this on the agenda, and we can have updates on progress, the links with the IMO, which are very important, and it can be pushed up through that channel as well. And as you say, reviewing the findings and any progress, you know, we can set some objectives based on the recommendations and measure how we're getting on over a period of time.
Okay, well, I think that sort of links up with what Susanna was saying about sharing experience, you know, and learning from each other. So with that, because I see we're just running over slightly, thank you very much for your to my panel members, to members, to Ricky, who's unfortunately, as I say, had to leave us for a prior meeting, to Susanna, thank you very much. Michael, and of course David, for not only being on the presentation but for doing the work of analysing the report. I'd just like to, before we close, just point out some of the things that we're planning to do to take this forward. We've got an online STEM event planned for later in the year. That's a science, technology, engineering and maths event, showing how women can contribute to search and rescue, not just at the frontline operational teams, but in a lot of the things that go on behind that all contribute to making a successful and effective search and rescue service. Obviously, we've got the Women in SAR Award, we've got the IMRF Awards generally in September, as Michael has already mentioned. And for next year, we're also hoping to run a second sort of women-only training event in 2022, which will follow up from the one we did in Rabat. Now, for those of you who haven't already seen the link that's been in the chat box, at the top of the chat box, if you're keen to see the report, there's a picture of it there, or the picture of the cover. There's also the links that you can go on. You can just go onto the IMRF website and you should be able to find it. Should be, you know, links from the front page to guide you to it. This is the summary report that you can see a picture of there. There is a much fuller report which contains all the analysis that has been done that underpins this summary report, also available. So please download it, have a look at it. We will be looking at the recommendations and conclusions and seeing how we can support SAR organisations around the world in fulfilling some of the ambitions that we have for improving gender representation in maritime search and rescue, and for equality of opportunity for women in the maritime sector. And just before we finally close, having thanked all my speakers, thank you very much, having thanked Dave, and for Claire and Caroline, particularly behind the scenes, who've done a lot to make this possible. Obviously, I'd just like to reiterate the thanks to Trinity House, without whom, you know, this report would not have been possible. So hopefully this will be a stepping stone to some improvements in the future, and perhaps we can get towards those 5-year ambitions that our speakers have outlined if we all work together. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to everybody that's joined us to listen. Thanks to people who've submitted questions and comments. And again, thank you to the speakers. And we will see you again, I'm sure. So happy International Women's Day, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.